Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Wednesday, July 29th, and the time now is 9:35. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Tuesday, July 22nd, and second notice was issued on Monday, July 27th. The committee will hear and accept testimony on Bill 282-35 LS, the fiscal year 2021 Appropriating Act as requested by the governor, relative to the Guam Visitors Bureau fiscal year 2021 budget request. Joining me for this budget hearing to my immediate left is Madam Vice Speaker Senator Talina Nelson. My immediate right would be the Oversight Chair of the Guam Visitors Bureau, Senator Therese Terlai. Down below, I'll begin with Senator Regine Besco-Lee, Senator Jim Moylan, Senator Will Castro, Senator Mary Camacho Torres, Senator Amanda Shelton, and down below would be Senator Tello Taidevi, the Minority Leader. The general rules for this budget hearing. Those testifying on behalf of the department or agency will be recognized by the chair, and I have recognized already the panel that are present. They are former governor and now current CEO or president, man in charge again, of now of GVB, and with former chairman and CEO and president also, Mr. Jerry Perez. And they also brought their staff, which is really the key to their success, the money lady. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read and lengthy testimony should be summarized. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. My colleagues and panel, we are here to discuss your budget 2021 budget. We may ask some questions of 2020, but I ask my colleagues to minimize that so we can move along in the discussion of their budget. The panel will be allowed to present oral testimony, and once you're done, you're asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and or may be asked to leave or be escorted removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You will please state your name and the title for the record. At this time, I ask the panel members from the Guam Visitors Bureau to rise and for our Sergeant at Arms to please swear them in. Por favor. Thank you, panel. I will now ask the CEO, President, former Governor Carl Gutierrez, also former Senator Carl Gutierrez. Thank you, sir. And Speaker.
Thank you. That's very important in this whole. And your dad was Speaker too. Mr. Chairman, Joseph Agustin, honorable senators, allow me, please, to set the tone of our budget hearing by reading into the record our take on this budget process and what we, in this unprecedented time, are looking forward to be dealing with. Prior to COVID-19 pandemic, the island had been enjoying record arrivals from the diversification of our markets and added airlift of several low-cost carriers. However, tourism, the backbone of our economy, is facing very difficult challenges and is in need of all the support it can get. Fiscal year 2021 will be a year focused on rebuilding our #1 industry. We have to retool and adapt to the changes and expectations of this new travel environment. As visitor demands and motivations shift, we understand the crucial need to reposition our island to accommodate these global fluctuations. However, the amount of resources that we have grown accustomed to over the years have also taken a significant hit, leaving us in a difficult position for the years ahead. What's at stake is the important contribution of tourism to the people of Guam. $2.5 billion a year into the local economy, $260 million in government taxes, 34% of Guam's workforce. Since the impacts of COVID-19 back in February, almost all our industry workers have been negatively impacted. So GVB understands the necessity of rebuilding our industry. As a community, we have done an excellent job combating the pandemic and instituting health safety protocols in the new normal of doing business. We now need to focus our efforts on persuading the government of our key markets, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, to lift their travel restrictions and non-essential travel advisories for Guam. The Bureau has analyzed our markets through an in-country research with consumers as well as input from our partners on the expectations of the return of our visitors. The forecast that we have prepared is based on these hang on a second. The forecast that we have prepared is based on these factors as well as current events in each market. Japan, our most stable market. They are experiencing a spike in COVID-19 cases that would further delay their ability to travel. Taiwan, our highest spending market. There is a strong concern for imported cases as the country took extreme precautions to limit their infections. And Korea, South Korea, our volume market. Current travel restrictions that includes 14-day quarantine measures associated as a USA, which is a place that we're not really looking to bring any tourists in, but our residents, due to the exponential increases in COVID-19 cases in the U.S. mainland and Guam being associated as a U.S. territory, we are unfortunately positioned as such that our source markets are either banned or discouraged from traveling to our island. The figures we are presenting today is a drastic decrease from our fiscal 2020 budget, and there are several fundamental changes that need to be made. Number one, we are seeking the legislature's support and approval to refinance the hot bond to reduce debt service from $7 million to $4.2 million in fiscal year 2021. And two, we are seeking support to keep our carry-forward amounts to assist on our recovery efforts. And three, we are seeking amendment to GVB's enabling legislation that would allow for timely planning and streamlining the approval processes. With the support of this legislature, we are confident, Mr. Chairman, that by fiscal year 2024, we will be on track with our year-over-year growth levels of 2019. Por respeto para hamdo todos, Carl Gutierrez from the Guam Visitors Bureau. You want to do presentation? We would like to, at this time, have Mr. Paris and Josie do a presentation for you on screen so that we can go faster.
Thank you, thank you, Governor. If I could get the first slide up, I just wanted to walk through some of the issues. Next slide. Fiscal year 2021 is not an understatement to say that it's going to be a very challenging year ahead. The COVID-19 recovery is going to be much, much more difficult than the experience we have had with SARS a few years ago. So this recovery also is not going to be a typical recovery after a typhoon or an earthquake, but we have entered a new paradigm in the travel industry where we really need to retool our destination for the new paradigm of travel. And we need to reposition our destination with limited resources. So it's a real challenge. Next slide, please. Underscoring the importance of the tourism industry, the governor has shared that it's $2.5 billion a year into our economy. Putting it in a different context, this really represents about $200,000 per hour in lost tourism sales. So bringing that to reality, and that's on a 24-hour period. So on an 8-hour commercial day, you can see the numbers are different, but keep that in mind. $200,000 per hour is what this island is losing out by not having tourism. And our experience with SARS, we had like about 5 months to recover to pre-SARS levels, and that's 35% or 34% down in arrivals. So it took us about 5 months to recoup that loss. We're talking now about 90% drop in our arrivals. So it's logical to assume that it's going to take us a little bit more than the 5 months that we needed to recover from SARS. Elsewhere, the Ebola virus is also just as devastating. So to put this in perspective of employment, the governor mentioned, we do have a lot of people whose jobs depend on tourism. So that's one of the reasons why we're focusing not only on instituting the new normal of doing business, but also trying to generate green shoots of opportunity and trying to persuade our source markets to start sending customers to Guam, because roughly 21,000 jobs is dependent on that. In making our assumptions for arrivals, which obviously drives the TAF income, we took a look at several strategic assumptions. First of all, like the governor was saying earlier, there is a negative impact of restricted travel to Guam from our source markets, more than 90% of that. Our source markets are also prioritizing their tourism industry domestically, because about 80 to 85% of their tourism industry is domestic, and maybe 10 or 15% is international. In our case, it's just the reverse. So the priorities right now, like in Japan, in Korea, and in Taiwan, is domestic tourism to make up the gap in their supply-demand chain. So that's what we have to confront with. So in doing our analysis, we look at our arrivals, both a bottoms-up approach and also top-down approach. The bottoms-up approach is a significant analysis on what's on the ground that's impacting the travel industry. The top-down analysis is taking figures from airport projections based on the airlines' estimate on their customers. The other impediment also is that we don't have a vaccine available, and that non-essential travel advisories are still being dictated by our source markets. This non-essential travel advisory means that travelers can't even get traveler's insurance. And so the current travel at this time to these islands have been, or to these markets, have been essentially business-related travel, because they have business to conduct with whether it's Cambodia or Thailand or other places. So I mentioned to you the SARS experience, so I won't go through that. Next slide, please. And just jump to the next slide, which shows you basically the end result of these projections. Can you get the next slide? Okay, so this pretty much gives you a snapshot on the plummeting revenue stream from the Tourism Attraction Fund. And so from July, August, and September of this year, to be honest with you, this is our best guess. And that's exactly what it is a guess. I'd like to think it's an educated guess, but a guess nonetheless. So this gives you kind of a range. If you look at the next slide, you can see that starting in January, it started to soften. And then we really took a big hit after February and March. And the reason it wasn't as bad in February and March is we had the benefit of the Roosevelt that has been pumping occupancy rates. But then you look after February and March, it plummets down significantly. And this is the percentage drop to which I referred earlier about recouping compared to SARS. Next slide. So in terms of budget considerations, the budget that was submitted earlier for the fiscal 21 budget of 22.4 million right now is irrelevant. And I know we needed to comply with your request to provide you those details, but I would tell you that those details are totally out the window. So the GVB has to do its own adjustment, and in estimating our visitor arrivals, we figured that the best we can do, if we're lucky, is to achieve arrivals at $400,000 through September of next year. This means that we have a projected tourist attraction fund income of $13.5 million. One of the reasons why we are urging appeal that you pass the refunding of the hot bonds is that that would provide us with some cash flow savings that we can employ during the year or during the rest of the year. The estimated debt service reduction is from $7 million to $4.2 million, and I believe the Bureau of Budget and Management folks are packaging this together with Gita for your consideration as part of the FY21 budget for the administration. The next slide. Looking at the next slide, you can see red marks all over the place with one exception, and that exception is the destination management sector. And this really is a sector that's important because we have certain fixed costs that we can't ignore. It's called beach cleaning, it's called the visitor safety officers. Somebody mentioned the question, why do we have VSOs when we have no tourists? Might be a good question. The real reason is that these folks are doing a great job protecting our assets, protecting the resources that our visitors and even local residents are using in the parks and other areas. So that's the only area that didn't really suffer from our takedown on funding. Next slide. So I know that it might be wishful thinking, but if there's any way that the Bureau can get additional support from other than TAF resources, that would be greatly appreciated. We are also exploring a variety of grant opportunities. One of the things that we're looking at right now is packaging a grant for the renovation of the Matapang Beach Park, because that's been really a terrible situation there. And we have actually set aside about little over $3 million to fix that, but it looks like we're going to have to capture that money into our operating account so that we can function while we seek a grant to pay for that from EDA. We also discovered just yesterday that GURA might be an opportunity for us to work with HUD, because there are some marketing dollars that might be available with HUD as they make funding available for destination marketing. So those are issues besides the pending CARES Act benefit that we are trying to rely on. So finally, the last slide is just calling your attention to earlier conversations that we have had with the Budget Committee and the committee chair, Mr. Lahi, of whatever the TAF income is, if we can consider an 80-20 split in the allocation. One of the reasons why the governor has suggested this early on is that during the good years, the TAF has become another general fund, and so a lot of departments and a lot of activities have become addicted to that source of funding. I would tell you, it is no longer there. But having said that, we also realize the importance of other issues that are priorities to the senators, and that's where this conversation led to a possibility of an 80-20 split. If I had my way, personally, I'd say let's get the 80 first before we dispense the 20, but I digress. The other thing we wanted to call to your attention, and we discussed with members of the committee earlier, is the need for us to keep, there's some carry forward funding that we need to make sure that does not terminate with the fiscal year, and that in fact we can continue to spend carry forward funding until it's exhausted. We are aware that the flip side to that is it's based on 2019 income, and we're mindful of not spending more than what actually is taken for FY19. The last amendment, 9111, that the governor alluded to earlier, making it more easy for us to facilitate decisions, is really harmonizing the codified restriction where the code requires the board to approve expenses over $1,000, but at the same time, the board is mindful that it's probably more management sensitive to allow a higher spending limit, and that spending limit, I believe, is $25,000 that the board had authorized. But so the code needs to be modified to harmonize the conflict between what the code requires and what the board policy is on expenditure. And that kind of wraps up the presentation on PowerPoint, Mr. Chairman, and we'll be happy to answer questions. And Josie, our financial controller, is here for the easy questions. Carl and I can handle the difficult questions. You can refer to her.
All right, thank you, thank you, Uncle Jerry. You know, I have a list of questions, but your presentation pretty much answers everything, because the questions I had were pre-pandemic, and being of your proposal and your presentation, it's reflecting the pandemic, where you're at, where you're going, and how you're trying to get there. The only question I'm going to ask, just going to your slide, on one of your slides, you put down, I guess where you have numbers, the admin, you put down a year, and then you put VSLY, that's versus last year. You're doing percentage, that's what you're saying, right?
You know, Senator, you're kind of muffled. I can't really understand.
Oh, okay.
Which slide?
Well, unfortunately, you're, okay, we can look at slide 9, we can look at slide, if the folks, if you notice it says VSLY, that's referring to versus last year, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Let's just spell it out, the last year, so we know it's not something else. But, and it was on percentage. My concern was more is, on your last page, you have, page 11, you wanted, updating of the 80 to 20% split. If they can go ahead and slow that page 11 up on the board, if you can please just explain those updates you're asking for. You want 80 to 20%, 80 to 20% split for TAF after bond service payment.
Yes.
What are we looking at? What is your numbers? You're looking at 13 million for the year, and if you get the hot bond refinance, it'll be 20 million?
No.
What?
The proceeds are going to be around 13 million, and then we need to deduct for debt service for both years, and so that gives us basically 9.2 million to operate.
Okay.
So from that 9.2 million is where we take off the 80-20.
Okay. Now, but I'm trying to get at is that then, what is your budget for 2021 specifically? 13 million or
Yes.
9?
9.2.
80% of 9. Okay. Do you have, I know you're working with Gita on refinancing your hot bonds.
Yes.
Please work that with your oversight chair so we can get that moving a little bit faster.
Yes, we were actually going to give you like a draft of bond counsel,
Right.
but really that's not our employee, and so we're relying on bond counsel through Gita and the.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping to speed it up because the clock is ticking.
Yes.
And you're going to need the help you're going to need. I mean, gosh, from 44 million from 2020 down to 9 million?
The way,
That's a serious drop.
yeah, Senator, the way I understand that, the delivery schedule is February 2021, and that's what we are shooting at, and that would give you the amount of money that we have been discussing. We can
Okay.
actually have delivery earlier in November, I am advised by Gita, but that will only give us like 5 million in savings, so it's not really that meaningful. So we just assume, since we still have operating cash for the first couple months, to wait until February, we can get the bigger amount.
And what is the numbers you were looking at that you wanted to roll over? What is the amount?
Rollover?
Yeah, you wanted to roll over whatever you have today,
Oh,
lapses? What's the amount you were looking at? Maybe
it's about 1 point,
your money lady can answer that.
yeah.
Anticipating about 1.2 million
Yeah.
that we received recently from the when we had to revisit our budget and revamp our budget when this COVID-19 hit back in April. We received 1.2 million from Department of Administration for our TAF allocation, and out of that, we are looking to receive. My last conversation with BBMR is we're looking up to the end of the year about 3.3 million, which represents 50% of the average allotment monthly for GVB. So basically, we are anticipating more from DOA for the TAF. So
Okay,
we're
you-
looking for that to be kept for the following year, because right now we are very smart and cautious as far as our spending because of the current economic trend globally.
So you're looking about $3+ million.
Yes, sir. But part of that has already been committed. We had to reinstate our visitor safety officers. We also have to reinstate our destination development work as far as our island road maintenance, our beach cleaning, and our bus shelter maintenance, because we're afraid that if it gets eroded, it will be more costly for us to restore as we welcome our visitors. And it's also for the people of Guam, for the community as a whole, to make sure that it's safe for everyone.
No, I understand. You guys are in the preparation. You want to not wait until it's too late. Get it ready, so when it starts, you're ready to move. You're not waiting for it. No, I'm in full support of that. That's good planning. That's better than waiting until another issue comes up. But no, I have no objection to what you're requesting for. I know that I'll let the oversight work that, but I'm in support of GVB. I'm in support. When you mentioned the 80-20, that actually sounds right at this point. And you're right. We need to stop using TAF as another general fund. We need to come up with something more beneficial to the people of Guam. If it's going to be, I honestly believe, if it's going to be TAF driven, it should be TAF driven by the tourist market, not just to fix something that they're never really going to fix. Just going to hire a bunch of people and not really clean the roads, not really do what we expect, because the whole island is a tourist spot. It's not just Tumon.
That's exactly
And
right.
it's really sad because we can all drive around, all my colleagues, we can admit, we can drive around this island and all the money that was floating, the grass is not cut. There's just a bunch of problems that maybe we just need to ask the new CEO and the vice CEO, when you handle it, we will just look for you for what's going on, not anybody else.
But, you
Right,
know,
right, Governor?
Yes, Senator, and if I may add, just
Yes.
because I used to be up there and I always try to reach out to make life easier for our agencies that have to produce a certain product. And when I was at Adelup, I initiated through the legislature a leeway for me to be able to say, I noticed that Parks and Recreation, in their daily cleanup of parks and beaches, that they're spotty, if any, if it's really moving, if they're even doing it. So I instituted one where I went into the community with the mayors and found a family that were getting food stamps, and that they have 5 or 6 kids, And what we did was we bought them necessary equipment to, for example, Laddystone Park. They adopted that as like a family business. 24 hours a day, they keep the bathrooms going. But sometimes the laws that are in place for procurement of these services become very convoluted, and then, there'll be just protest after protest. That's why we included the mayors in selecting which families might be able to do the Fort Santa Agueda, and all those places that we've picked. In Arahan Pool, for example, there's that bathroom there that's never open, simply because they break it down, or if we give it to one family there, in close proximity, the children, everyone, they have the tools and the equipment, and they'll run it, and they'll have a livelihood. But we need that kind of extra authority to be able to do this and accomplish this without having to jump through all the hoops of protest after protest for bidding procedures. It's small, but it's what we need now.
All right, Governor, I'm in support of that. As soon as your oversight introduce it, you got my support.
Oh, thank you, Senator Therese.
I'm going to pass it to Senator Therese on that one. Just moving, I'm just trying to go over what you presented just a little bit. I guess pretty much I covered most of your budget. I have no reservation on what you presented right now,
Thank you.
Governor and Uncle Jerry and staff. Senator Therese, I will pass it to the oversight chair if she has questions. I had a whole list, but I'm going to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Governor. Good morning,
Morning.
Mr. Paris and Josie. Thank you for your presentation. As to the 80-20, when the numbers are like this, of course, I don't think anybody's going to object to that. But I just want to point out that when we were looking at 22 million budget for GVB, we were also using TAF money, or the legislature had appropriated TAF money, and I think in the governor's budget request, she had requested TAF money also go towards the fire department, police department, Parks and Rec, as you said, Governor, earlier, the mayors, a small part of it goes to EPA, some of it goes to Chamorro Affairs, and I can see the logic in extending them, some of the TAF money to improving our destination, to making sure we can bump up the GPD precincts down in Tumon and other things that are very much related to improving our destination, improving our market. So, of course, when the tourism industry is doing well, I'm hoping that we, are going to still be able to see that type of improvement to our community, because that's the whole purpose of, this industry, is to build our community's quality of life up. But I appreciate your budget. If I could just ask, so the original request from the governor was a $22 million budget for GVB. That's what you had in 2020. And, but now we're looking at drastic decreases. So you're predicting now estimated visitors of only 400,000, and with an income of 13.4 to the TAF, which would give you a budget of 80% of $9.2 million. Is that correct, Josie? That's what we're looking at.
Sorry. Based on the 400,000 visitors arrivals that we are anticipating for FY2021, so we're looking at $13,464,000 of TAF money. And out of that, we first removed the hot bond, the bond payments after the refinancing, which is $4,176,788, which represents 31% of the 13 million. And the GVB is asking for $9,287,000, which represents 69%.
What is the amount?
$9,287,212.
Which already represents the 80%.
Actually, it is only 69% at this time.
Okay.
Because we had, if we have to use the 13 million multiplied by 80%, then it's gonna be before hot bond.
Okay.
So It's
And this, again, is a debt service after refinancing. So if it's before refinancing, it might be different. It will be less to
yes, it will
GVB.
be very, very less.
Okay, and then the binder that we have in front of us today, this does not reflect the $9.2 million. That's correct. It reflects a $22 million budget.
Yes, yes, ma'am. This is after post-COVID-19, we had to realign our budget, but that is also the same bottom line that we submitted at the executive branch.
All right, so do we have the details for the 9.2 million?
Yeah.
Mr. Paris?
If I could interject?
Yes.
Senator, my earlier comment was that the original submission is totally irrelevant.
Right.
What we actually would like the legislature to do is agree with at least our top line number, and so that we can have the board and management work out those details, because at the present time, it's impossible to give you the kind of details that you really, that reflects like the
Such a
previous year's
drastic
budget.
cut.
Yeah.
All right.
So if we
Fair.
could have the legislature's approval for the top line number and leave the flexibility to the board to allocate within that amount, I think that's probably what we would like to see.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that because this budget binder that we have in front of us is actually different than the original request, but now we have to look for other details also. Okay. Can you just explain, in the last GVB meeting, you had estimated, Mr. Perez, a visitor arrival of 251,000, not 400,000. So how did it go?
Yeah, I will explain that very simple. At the board meeting, I owed the board our first look at all the good news and bad news that we can deal with. And we were basically doing a bottoms-up analysis. And that was the first iteration. And then we needed to do a top-down analysis looking at the arrival projections by the airlines at the airport and try to come down to some logical median. And that's probably about as best as I can explain, is that we did a top-down look and a bottom-up look and reviewed the arrival numbers in the airport forecast, and that seems to optimize what belief might be doable with a lot of effort. Again, that is conditioned on us being successful working with our source markets to try to lift some of the restrictions now that we've done our part on creating arrival protocols that would facilitate their entry and departure without much of a hassle on testing and that kind of stuff.
All right, could you just give us an idea then from what you used, I guess airport statistics or airport projections also? Who are these visitors expected to be, the 400,000 in FY21?
Well, probably from the airport numbers, they were looking at total enplanements and deplanements. We only look at arrivals. We don't look at even at transits. So their numbers were hovering around between 600,000 and change, and probably half of that is from our hometown carrier, and mainly from Japan and the U.S. And then probably 30% of that is from Japan Airlines, and the rest from Korea. And then the others, like Taiwan, are such small numbers that it really it's not material to the total picture.
All right, so the bulk of the visitors we're expecting in FY21, we're hoping are going to be Japan, or we're expecting Japan and Korea.
Yes,
South Korea.
I would suspect, given the situation now, that we'll probably have a faster turnaround from Korea than Japan, because they seem to be much quicker to respond to changes. Already we've had discussion a couple of days ago with a company that's chartering an aircraft to bring about 800 passengers to Guam for testing purposes on certification and that kind of stuff. So I'm optimistic that the quicker response we're going to be getting is from Korea.
I noticed in your budget request under the 22 million that the amount for marketing for Japan was not increased, or not asked to be increased, but the amount for the Korea market was asked to be increased in marketing. And I guess is that, you think that's still valid?
To be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the preparation of that budget because I went into this exercise.
Yes. Okay, then, never mind
Yeah.
that question. That's just, it's kind of moot at this point until you reconfigure the new budget.
Yes.
All right, then if I could move on to the 3.3 million in lapses, Josie, that you talked about is at the end of the year. So BBMR's been holding 50% of your regular allotments, approximately, and you're expecting them to release that at the end of the year. And you are allocated that already to VSO and maintenance of the beaches and the roads?
I just want to clarify. So since March, from March to May, we actually received 2,572,923. And out of that, we had several spending already when we reinstated some of the contracts for beach cleaning, island road maintenance, and allocation for, there's some commitments that the board already had decided as part of the recovery efforts, and we're looking at $961,000 that will be left out of that unexpended TAF that is not, that we are requesting to be rolled
only
over.
960,000,
Yes.
almost a million.
We are also looking at from June to September, so another probably another $1 million that we are anticipating from DOA. But because of the trend of the TAF collection, it might be impossible for them to give us another $800,000 for each month from June to September.
All right, so can you just give us a brief overall summary of what happened, what's adjusted for FY20? So FY20, you showed us the actual receipts are much less, BBMR's holding back. So what have we cut, I guess, marketing, it looks like?
Yes, for the marketing, immediately back in April, we have emergency board meetings, and we had to revisit all the contracts. A lot has been working from home and revisiting and our contracts from overseas market. We had to really cut the bleeding and making sure that we had to put a stop on several of those overseas markets that we had pre-committed. Another example is for the sports and events, like for this, the United Marathon, the Cocos Island Fest, we had to pull back, but of course there are some penalties and fees that we cannot unwind, and that's already been money that is gone out the...
All right, I think what I would like to know, before we get into our legislative budget session is if GVB, with the money that you end up, projecting for FY21, is going to continue the VSO programs and what parts of the maintenance programs are you going to be able to continue? I know that, there's a debate that that GVB shouldn't fund any of it, but I think that's very important still, and that without it, we are going to see rising crime in the area again.
Yeah, those expenses are really relate to creating a destination that our people on Guam can enjoy, as well as customers. And that includes basically upgrading some of the parks. Matapang Beach Park is an example that we were going to do, but we need to capture that capital expense and put it into our operation so that we can function. The other thing is on the VSO, they've been very, very helpful actually in terms of preserving our assets and our resources out there. And not so much for tourists now, but believe me, local residents. I mean, they help a lot of our local residents who patronize these parks and help them out. And then also the amount of money that we're going to be spending on that has to do with the beach cleaning, and it has to do with roadside maintenance and landscaping. And so that's an area that is, to me, I consider almost like a fixed expense that we need to to maintain, to have any integrity as a destination worth visiting.
All right, I'm glad to hear that. When I first started as chair of the tourism committee, that was really big at the time, that we were having a lot of crime at the beaches, at the parks, even here in Agustin. So they expanded their VSO down here, and GVB was by itself at that point taking care of at least 5 of the main tourist attraction parks and beaches. So I'm hoping that they will continue to do that type of work. But
If I may add, Senator,
yes, Governor.
because one of the blights down in Tumon particularly, and also at Paseo, but I believe that's been taken care of, the homeless people that are down there that providing us unnecessary scare. The Lieutenant Governor, Josh Tenorio, has assured me a few days ago that they have found another place, and the next group of people they would go after to remove, it would be down at Tumon. And I think the area that they're going to put them in also is around Tumon, but at least they're off the beach and off the parking structure down there. So those are the things that we're working very closely with the administration, who has the funds federally and with GURA and Guam Housing Corporation, that we're really trying to spruce up our destination.
Yeah.
That's very, very important now.
If I could add to that, Senator, that problem is not just a matter of being unsightly, okay? We are starting to market Guam as a hygienic and health-safe destination. And those kinds of problems are a breeding ground for contagious diseases and so forth. And so if we're going to live up to our promise that you can come to Guam for a very safe and hygienic destination experience, we need to address that as well.
In going forward, how soon do you think you would be able to give an estimate of where you will spend this very little money that you're going to receive? And do you foresee an impact on the current number of employees that you have at GVB?
Well, there are 2 that left, and so we're not filling any more positions as they leave. So we're going to wait and see what happens. If it happens to the entire government, we'll do our part. If there's any furloughs and all that other programs that may befall us, but as personnel leave or retire, we just do not fill those positions.
Yeah, there are 2 vacancies plus 2 leaving, so that's 4 that we're not going to be filling.
All right, because under the current personnel, if I'm reading this correct, it looks like you're spending $3 million on personnel alone. Is that right?
2.8.
Right now it's 2.8. So basically the original ask was 44 staff. However, we have 2 vacated positions that we will not be filling up, and the other 3 that is currently vacant that we will no longer fill.
Okay, so 44 staff, 2.8 million.
So now it will be only 39 staff.
And you're going to try to cover those with the new budget going forward. All right. Okay, yes. Mr. Chair, I'll let it go. I know there's others that need to ask questions, but thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Therese. Madam Vice, I know you have several questions, but you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think I have any questions at this time. It's pretty devastating to see the loss in revenue and the need that the things that we will have to do to move the money around. Last year, we received over $20 million in TAF, close to 30, I think. And so now this is the question is where do we move forward after this appropriation? Where, and how do we sustain our economy really? So I'm looking forward to those plans. It's not really clear, like you said. Sorry, sir, I forgot your name. The one next to the governor on the right?
Jerry.
Jerry. Forgive me, Mr. Perez. It's not very clear how GVB will be spending the money. Really, this fiscal year, I'm hoping that we can do some kind of line item budget appropriation, because everything is clear as mud when we're talking about the budget for this year. But I understand what you're asking. I understand that, out of the anticipated money of 13 million, the projected TAF to receive at 13 million, that we are looking now to appropriate in FY2021 9.2, and GVB is asking for 80% of that to rebuild our tourism economy, and that the 20% is at the liberty of the legislature to appropriate, which is going to be less than $2 million. And so last year in our budget appropriation, we spread out TAF everywhere to a lot of our line agencies, even to education areas, to a lot of our nonprofits. And so really my concern is how are we going to utilize this money to really promote our tourism economy. It's a lot of work ahead, and so I hope that in the upcoming months we will have some kind of oversight hearing or an informational hearing to see how we're moving forward with our tourism economy. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Governor, Mr. Perez, Josie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Senator Lee, you have any question? You'll be followed by Senator Moynihan, and we're just going to go down the aisle, and then it'll be after Senator Amanda, it'll be Senator Tello, and then work the other direction. Thank you.
Sizus Masi, Mr. Chair, and buenas colleagues, Hafaday, Governor, and Mr. Paris, and Ms. Josie, thank you very much for joining us and for your presentation. I think it certainly enlightened all of us the situation that we've been following for GVB and for our tourism industry, and I agree with the Vice Speaker. It's very troubling for us to hear, for many of us in the community, to hear these very dire projections, but I certainly remain hopeful, and I am in complete agreement with our leaders that, I'm looking forward to seeing the plans for GVB and to helping do what we can in the legislature to move GVB forward and our entire industry. I did have a few questions. Mr. Paris, you mentioned that many of our primary source markets are really shifting dramatically towards domestic travel. And I just wanted to ask if the Bureau is exploring efforts to market not only to local residents and have a little bit more community-based tourism, but even our regional neighbors and businesses within Micronesia, many of whom who have little to no COVID cases. And so I certainly recognize this isn't the same massive market as Japan or even Taiwan and South Korea, but if we can capture the lion's share of these travelers, maybe that can make a difference. So I just wanted to ask if that was something that GVB is considering.
Also, Senator, I should be already in touch with the Admiral, but we're looking at the military to be able to bring them out on a staycation, way to even get our own people working in the new normal so that they get so adept to, by the time we get our visitors in from Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. But you're absolutely correct. And we've been pressing upon people in the industry to figure out how they can drop their prices enough for our people to be able to go there and enjoy. It's part of their investment to do it and not worry about whether you make a profit or not for this particular time. It's part of your expenditure to bring out and market your own place and get the people working in the new normal so they'll understand it much better.
Thanks, Mr. Parrish, do you have anything to add?
I just want to echo his sentiment as well. There are two issues that relate to your question. One of them is inter-island travel and that has been severely curtailed by their governments as well,
right,
for risk of reintroducing the disease, and they're not able to cope with that medically. And the second issue really has to do simply with scale. You can get as many people, we call it staycations, right? Local as well as military staycations. And in fact, that was one of the first things we did while we were grappling with all these health issues to try to encourage customers to patronize local businesses. The problem with that is scale,
right,
because there isn't enough. When you get facilities handling, institutional facilities handling over 100,000 customers a month, we just don't have the scale to justify some of the larger properties opening up their facilities. They have accommodated that to a degree, but they've had to scale down to a level that really makes financial sense for them just to survive.
Right. I understand. And I'm glad that the governor mentioned kind of Smurf markets. I know that's something that you're focusing on. So yeah, my next question was, if you could give us some details on mice, on Smurf, on maybe the LGBTQ groups that we could try to pursue. I'm just trying to figure out. I know that was part of your FY21 goals, and so I just wanted to reach back to you and see if you had any details about those social, military, educational, religious, I'm forgetting the F, for Smurf, and also the mice markets.
Yeah. Well, with respect to that, of course, just any visitor we'd like to have, right now, regardless. The mice market tend to be cyclical, and we just weren't able, at least I'm looking at, retroactively here, we're just not equipped to handle large mice markets at this time, and it's a very competitive market which books out like 3 to 4 years in advance. With respect to the Smurf markets, they tend to be really bottom feeders, and so we have enough issues dealing with spending, and of course right now we'd take anything, right? But those tend to be more sensitive to pricing, and I think the last thing we want to do is dwindle down our yield per visitor.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. That makes a lot of sense.
Thanks.
I think, a major obstacle to reinvigorating our tourism economy is, how our source markets are going to handle those returning residents, right, who visited Guam in terms of the quarantine and all those different things. We know that the U.S. is currently labeled as a very high risk or hotspot for many countries. And certainly a 14-day quarantine upon coming back to our island is a huge deterrent for people who are, any visitor deciding whether or not to come here to Guam. So I know this was asked previously to you, Gov, but what is GVB and the administration doing to ensure that these national governments of important source markets like, high volume South Korea or Japan, how they treat Guam as unique and separate entity from the U.S. for the purposes of their mandatory quarantine policies that are going to be imposed upon residents that are returning from travel?
Thank you for that question, Senator. There's several things. Number one, the Guam being lumped into the one-size-fits-all in the part of the United States. Although we know that we're separate out here and we have our own protocols, but in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, when they see the United States banned these countries from coming into the United States, they know that it affects us. So I've been working with Governor Lou Leon Guerrero, and I've been in communications with the Delegate San Nicolas. And we have been, and also to the credit of the Republican Party here in Guam, also working with them to be able to work on the Republican side in the White House, and we're working on a schedule to go there, and we're going to press the carving out of Guam into America in Asia out here so that these people can look at us for protocol and procedures-wise a lot better. Now, Governor Lou Leon Guerrero has put together a protocol right now that is inviting and safe for tourists to come in from Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. Although Japan is at the high-risk cusp right now, I believe in the next few days they would bring it down themselves. But we can't control those countries. So what do we do? I went and I presented to the Physicians Advisory Group, the governor that makes all these decisions yesterday, and I proffered certain procedures that I think we can initiate. We've been working with the consul generals here also for those countries. But we have already 11, maybe by tomorrow we'll have 21 of those Abbott machines for testing, where you can get in 11 minutes, you can get a result for negative. So we're thinking of procedures, and I'm going to be meeting them this afternoon, probably at noon, with the rest of the doctors and public health, to be able to find a procedure where that testing process could be privatized. And so that even in the hotels, they could go into the hotels and swab them, because in Korea, for example, our marketing group and the people that book tours to Guam, they can include in their ticket, if they want to get a test at the hotel when they get here, they'll get it in 10 minutes, and they can fly home without worry of quarantine if we can't control that side of the equation. So those are the things we're doing right now, and we would have enough machines, we would have enough turnaround time to be able to sell that and to educate those people in our source markets that if you want to come to Guam, you can do this, and you can go back without worry of quarantine. And so those are the things we're working on, and hopefully by this afternoon we'll have public health, Arts and Agustin, and Dr. Felix Cabrera, and Dr. Mike Cruz, and Dr. Wynn, Dr. Berg. All of those guys are in place to be able to, they like the idea, so we're working out the details.
Thank you very much for the update, Gov. I think that's really, I remain hopeful that that's something that we can move forward. And Mr. Chair, I just have one final question. So the rate of COVID-19 cases and deaths, they're certainly, rising in the U.S. and certain parts of Asia. So far, I think COVID has certainly provoked some stigma against tourism and against tourists. And so I just wanted to ask if any of the local businesses, or especially in the hotel industry, have they expressed any concerns to GVB about possible upticks in cases locally due to reopening tourism? Is that a concern for our local businesses?
The thing that we really always have to worry about, is are the tourists being treated the same as our residents? And so now the COVID committee that are doing these things, we just ask them, be just concerned about the people of Guam, the residents. Do not get beyond our shores. Let GVB figure out how to get that thing done. But we have been working very closely with the businesses in the industry, with GITA, on how to be able to get them some money to be able to offset all their losses, and that thing is moving forward. And hopefully the conference committee in Congress right now will come to a resolution, so we will begin to extend those programs and to continue to bring more funds to Guam to help the small businesses. I don't think they, per se, don't like the tourists to come here. They just don't want to be treated differently than the way they're treating the residents here.
Thank you very much, Gov, for all of your very straightforward answers. And I just want to encourage GVB to continue doing what it's doing. I think the messaging coming out from the Bureau has been really, really great, and really helps to provide a tone and a message for the local community and for leaders here to really latch on to and to assist as we begin ramping back up and welcoming visitors. Because I just want to make sure that they have that really great Guam experience, and that we are able to share that Hafaday spirit with them, and really continue to promote the Guam that we all know and love.
Just so everyone can hear, this new GVB group right now that's running this place is going to take this opportunity to reset the vision that was back in 1967 for tourists, and to make it Chamorro-centric, and to start to bring it back to the specialness that Guam was. And so that's very important. This is a time to do it if we don't want to miss the boat on this. And so that's where we're structuring all the tourist and marketing stuff, is to bring back the culture of Guam, of why they want to come here besides the beauty. So you've got two old guys here, that's Chamorro, and
Well, yeah, he can speak for himself.
Thank you, Senator Lee. I think the governor is referring to the oldies but goodies, right? Thank you, Governor. I'd like to also recognize I have two additional colleagues that have joined us, Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano and Senator Sabina Paris. Senator Moylan, do you have any questions? And you'll be followed by Senator Mary Camacho Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. as well. Yes, a few questions. And first, I want to thank you for giving us your revised budget and asking us just to work with those numbers. And I appreciate that. As you know, we do have the budget hearing coming up, and we're hoping to see other revised budgets, but we don't. So with your proposal, that's really helpful, and especially if you want the 80-20, which I think is a great idea. I do have before I get on to some other questions, Mr. Paris, on slide 11, you talked about the amendment to the subsection 9111. Can you kindly expand on that for me a little bit more, please?
Yeah, I think under the code, not I think, but under the code, any expenditure over $1,000 requires getting board approval. Okay, and what the board had done not too long ago was passed a board policy authorizing the president up to
24,999.
yeah, 24,000, something like that. So there's a inconsistency between what the board policy asks for and the codified restrictions. So all this is really need to make that change so that they can harmonize the intent of the board.
It sounds like a simple fix,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. We want to expedite this process. I mean, $1,000 really is your checkbook amount. That's the best,
Yeah.
most we can do for you. Sorry about that, but
Yeah.
hopefully we can
Yeah,
expedite
well, that's
that.
important too, because when GVB goes through a financial audit, typically that's an easy pick for an auditor, right? And so,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then also, I think here, on your slide 9, getting back to destination management, that's the only increase we see because of the importance that you're trying to stress to us. One of them for that budget is the VSO, right? Visitor security. And I live down in Tuman, and I see them often, and
Yeah.
man, they're sharp. You know, they got their stuff together. They got their uniform on, and they're very polite and very professional. They're riding their bikes or they're walking. But I think it's really helpful. I like their uniforms also. They're bright yellow. You can spot them down the hall. And I think some of the homeless issues, they kind of move them along as well, keep them out of the bus stops too.
Yeah.
But that's basically would you say that's an example of some good private partnership,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because in reality, we should be using Guam Police Department to do these kind of things, but we're
Yeah.
short-stretched.
Yeah.
And we can't let that, we're not going to let that fall apart. So we're fortunate that GVB is focusing on that. And I think it should be expanded. And you had the ability previously to expand the VSO to Agana, right? And that was very helpful as well. And as other colleagues have mentioned, our tourists are going to go all over the place. And if it means that we had to put more VSOs in other places, maybe so at these different tourist spots throughout the island to ensure that while we eventually build back our economy to get our police force going. But I would like to see more presence of the VSO, and I think that's a great example of private partnership for our government and our community. And as you mentioned, it's public safety for also our residents too. I jaywalked across the street down in Tuman, and one of those VSOs reminded me, safety first, safety first. So it's a good thing to have. You mentioned also that the destination management will be helping with the bus shelters. I see those are beautiful bus shelters down there too. And I did notice they were wiping it down. I'm not sure what company that was, but they were wiping down the tops of it, the benches, the whole thing.
That's all part of what we do. We're not supposed to be doing stuff like that, but somebody's got to do it to maintain the integrity of a destination image. And just to add to actually what Senator Racine and the old man here were talking about, the Chamorro heritage, the added value for them is if we promote, when we market Guam, we create certain expectations, rightly or wrongly, and one of those expectations is the Chamorro culture and heritage. Now, VSO interacting with customers and sharing the Chamorro hospitality, the Chamorro spirit, is very much a part of that brand identity that we want to solidify. And so we can do a lot by reinvesting in our cultural heritage sites, which requires some capital. But there's a lot of things we can do, software-wise, to reinforce the brand identity of the Chamorro culture without spending a lot of money. And that's just the interaction of these people with our visitors.
Thank you for that, and I'm glad we can continue with that. And keeping our bus shelters clean too for the tourists also. I do see some, we also have mass transit bus stops down in Tumon, don't we, as well? I think there's one in front of the Akanta Mall. And occasionally I can see the overnighters with their six-pack just hanging out over there too, just wanting, we need to wake them up. You know, if the VSOs can get those guys, kick them a little bit and move them along and wake them up, that will be good too. But another thing you also mentioned is the beach cleanups, right, as well. And again, that's should be Parks and Recs, but we know their situation too. So we have a private company presently doing these beach cleanups, and I think it's pretty nice. I noticed the truck going up and down daily, picking up the trash that are in those dumpsters. But if not, I think our parks will be littered. But then that's another example of private partnership, again, that seems to be working out well. Mr. Parrish, you mentioned Matapang Beach, and that's a place I visit regularly too. And I noticed the pavilions have been improved, and the benches finally, after the rebar has been popping out there, and you didn't really want to sit on it because you could get a tetanus shot from the rust forming. But that was actually being done, I understand, by United Airlines, and I think you have a board member also. If you can explain on that and who that board member is that was instrumental in getting this done, please.
Well, everyone knows Mr. Sam Shinohara, and our own local guy heading the United Airlines. He's been very, very helpful with destination for Guam. He's had under the wings, he put him under his wings, Nikisha Garrido and Eileen Kiragua, and they have been relentless in going out there to be able to monitor the place, count the homelesses, just look at everything that they can. They're really into their work, and that was a great combination of that group. So that's what we're looking at, to have a more permanent ownership of certain areas. Like, for example, I know I tried to embarrass him into accepting, but he didn't accept yet. The new DFS guy, I said, why don't you guys fix up that bathroom in Arahan, and you handle it. We'll give it to you to pay for the family that's going to be cleaning that, and so those are the things we're going to be looking at, so that someone really takes ownership of certain areas in Tumon as part of their responsibility. Maybe 100 feet in front of their businesses, or 50 feet, it depends. We're going to go and mark it off, and we tell them that you keep this thing beautified outside your door, you plant it, and so that's how we're going to do it from now. And then we don't have to worry about this one contractor going up and down, bush cutting and doing this. We have these people that actually take ownership of their particular area of responsibility.
Thank you, Governor. We also, you mentioned the grant for Matapang Beach too. Can you describe what they will be doing with that?
Yes, there's actually, we're pulling together with our consultants a grant package to renovate and improve the whole Matapang beach area. One of the problems there right now is flooding because when they built that park, the grassy area there, underneath there are some caverns for drainage. Well, it was never meant for heavy vehicles to drive on it, and so you get heavy vehicles going through there and it collapses the caverns, and so that's why you have that problem. And so we've got an EDA grant that we're almost ready to submit that should pay for that, and that should free some of the money that Josie was referring to earlier that had been committed to that project, so we can use that for operations while we get the grant money. I should say also, on this destination management issue, it really is important. You probably for the last month or so see those water trucks down Tumon, you know what they're there for? They're cleaning basically the storm drainage that hasn't been done in over 20 years. And that's been clogging up the works and creating all that flooding. So for the last few weeks, you've been seeing those trucks. That's what they're doing. And they're only clearing one channel. There are like 2 channels that I think they need to work on. But even that has already helped a lot. But so we're having to do, talk about retooling our destination. It's really from the ground up, not just retooling it from an image point of view, but our product. We've got to fix our product.
I agree, and I think our beach parks need major overhaul. I like the concept of where we can get families involved, that's good, but we're talking major overhaul initially, and then maybe we can get volunteers to come and sweep and pick up some trash. But like at Ipoh Beach, when's the last time that parking lot has been improved, right? You go to the upper level next to Hilton Hotel, I'm surprised the trees haven't collapsed on parked cars. You got rubber tires around these little fences because the posts are totally rusted. I'm surprised kids haven't gotten cut up by that.
Okay, Senator Moreland, that's Parks and Rec.
Right.
I don't want GVB to fund that.
Oh, thank you. Which gets me to my other point. Is GVB actually will be funding Parks and Recs, which you have been from previous budgets? With your revision here and what you're looking at, what are you telling us about Parks and Recs?
In our revised budget, we have not included that. I mean, we basically need to pull back on everything just to have something to deal with.
Okay. All right. Appreciate that. So it sounds like we can do with it what you've been successful with before. Private-public partnership with VSO, with beach cleanups, private-public partnership, and to include the bus shelters. If we want destination management to continue, I think that's what we're looking at, because we know the situation with our budget, and we want the tourists to come back on. And I really promote, and I'm glad you guys support the private-public partnership. And I think we continue to see some success in Two Lovers Point, for example, and that when we finally get these things fixed up and cleaned up, with some private-public partnerships, maybe we can prevent this vandalism that happens overnight after we fix the bathrooms, after we fix the street lights. Yeah. And we gate that up so we can get things going again. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moreland. I apologize. I said GVB funding. It's TAF funding. But Senator Torres, do you have any questions? And you're followed by Senator Amanda Sheldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor and Mr. Paris, it's certainly nice to have you here and listen to your presentation. My questions that I have, Governor, in your testimony, you talked about the drastic reduction in figures as a result of the TAF, and you came up with 3 suggestions of changes that have to be made. The first one being the refinancing of the hotel occupancy tax bonds to reduce the debt service from $7 million to $4.2 million. What is the proposed timeline for going out and refinancing the hot bonds? And is there a restriction or a penalty for doing it immediately? I understand it's pending approval by the legislature, but is there a timeline for the refinancing of the hot bonds?
Yes, well, I'll have Mr. Perry explain that. It's February, and there's no penalty of anything.
No, there's no. It's all embedded there. Gita is working this process with Council and BBMR, but what it amounts to is if we want like $5 million or something like that in November this year, they can expedite execution. But we prefer, and we consulted with them, to wait until February delivery, where we can get the $14 or $15 million less costs and so forth. So there is no extension of the term. Mm-hmm. It's basically the same term, and so that's basically what we have.
Yeah, but that clearly is the most logical and smart first step that GVB would take. I did have a question in your slide on page 10 regarding additional funding. I'm not so sure what you mean by creating nonprofit 501c3 to increase the eligibility with financing programs and long-term liquidity. Can you just explain how that would work
Yes.
in GVB's?
Yes, I am told that the staff, prior to us getting there, had tried to get some grant funding through the federal government, either with CARES Act or other sources. And we are not a 501 corporation that's eligible because we're a public nonprofit membership corporation and not the same as a 501c, is it? No, C corporation. And so one of the ideas that our people have come up with is maybe we can create the possibility of us creating a separate organization or a separate association that is 501c qualified, and through that be able to apply for grants. Absent that, however, we've been working actually with the Bureau of Plans and Statistics to get that thing done. Number one, and number two, also working, starting to work now with GURA, because we found out that there's some funding available for destination marketing through HUD. The other issue on the starting this association is, and this is not, by the way, thinking out loud, not necessarily formally consummated, but one of the ideas that we're kicking around is if we create this association and have a funding for it, that it would be some kind of a revolving fund where it would be self-sustaining, and that could involve as simple as maybe the mayors, for example, who has not been issuing citations for a number of issues, and that could be a source of fund for more self-improvement at the destination level. So, like I said, those are just ideas that we wanted to share with you, that we're really turning stones to figure out how to survive in the next few years. So it may or may not materialize, but that's the reason for that.
But I think I think it's very resourceful of you, and that's why I wanted to comment. I think it's very commendable that the Visitors Bureau is working with agencies that have a lot of grant authority, like Bureau of Statistics and Plans has historically gotten so much money for Guam with coastal development and rehabilitative type programs, which is right up, GVB's alley. GORA certainly is a good resource as well. But I'm very interested in what legislative amendments would have to be made, because I can't reconcile the 501c3 paradigm in the GVB, the way that your enabling statute is right now. But I would be very interested in pursuing that with you, because I think that the more that the GVB can diversify its resources to additional funding is absolutely the way you need to go. And I think it's very smart planning, Jerry and Governor, very smart planning on your part. And also, I wanted to just mention for the staff too, I thoroughly appreciate the binder that was provided. I know it's not relevant to the reduced budget numbers that you're requesting now, but it is a very good resource to for anybody interested in the complexities of marketing Guam and sustaining our market source. It's a nice tourism 101, I think, for anybody. So it's a good resource, and I appreciate that. I will, in the interest of time, allow my other colleagues to go on, but I just want to say thank you, and this was a very good.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Amanda Sheldon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, and Ms. Villanueva for being here this morning. I have a follow-up question on the hot bonds. I know, Mr. Perez, that you mentioned that you were working with Bond Council already, and I was wondering if there's any...
Not us.
Okay.
Gita is working with Bond Council, but we've been kind of in touch.
Okay, so maybe you know if there is a potential, what would be the extension of the lifetime of the hot bond?
Term hasn't changed.
Okay. Okay, it's good to hear. Thank you. And I was also very impressed by the tour we did at the airport with the Visitors Bureau and with United and all the folks at the airport to see the progress that we've made setting up the different stations to take temperatures, to check in, all the sanitation areas. Very impressive, and I felt very secure if I were to fly in and to be screened and to travel to Guam. It was, it was excellent. A lot of hard work was put into that, I could tell. And I'm wondering what efforts the Bureau is taking to work with other local companies in the tourism industry to ensure that our employees are staying safe. Everyone on the front lines in the hotels, at the car rentals, at the restaurants, that they maybe something like testing for the employees, because they're the ones who are going to go home and into the villages beyond Tuman after interacting with our tourists. Are we thinking about that yet?
Testing?
Testing or any kind of...
But to the credit of several of these businessmen, especially in Tuman and in construction, these people have just on their own tested their employees. And they do that occasionally, so they want to make sure themselves. So the government can step in. I'm sure that we're getting more test kits coming in because they're limited. I think they're limited to 1,000 at a time to get. So now that we have more of the machines, that they can request for more of the test kits. And that's what I brought up yesterday, is exactly what you're saying, is especially down in the restaurants area, not only in Tuman, everywhere that we can go in and test people. And it's now like 11 minutes, you'll find out if you're negative. That's all you need to know, is that you're negative. But
Okay, so not just for our visitors, but also for all of our workers in the industry.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah, if I could add on that, the WTTC, World Travel and Tourism Council, has come up with a credentialing process for businesses who meet health and hygiene standards. We are now currently working with the hotels and restaurants and people in GHRA to get them credentialed so that they can have their designation as safe travels emblem put. The airport actually has been the first one to do that, and some of the things that you experience at the airport, it relates to that. And so we are working as much as we can with GHRA and other businesses through a webinar system to try to get them trained and credentialed so that the more of our businesses that have that designation, I think the more secure it'll demonstrate, not just for visitors, but for the employees themselves.
Absolutely. I know that we want to make sure that we're welcoming visitors in the safest way possible, but we also have our guard up and we're protecting our people and our workers here in the industry. So thank you for that. I know that the Bureau also received some CARES Act funding. Can you share a little bit about how that was used?
Go ahead.
So basically, BBMR, through BBMR, we were allocated 231,810. And out of that, we received 58,136.36. And that was related to, we used it for protecting our employees as far as buying some supplies related to the COVID-19, making sure that our facility is, we are conducting fogging, especially we have high traffic of different visitors conducting different meetings at our place. We also use that for relocating our research department from the airport to the small conference room at our GVB office. We also put some, the shield to protect our reception and some reconfiguration of our workstation for social distancing.
Thank you very much for that. I have no further questions, but I would like to thank all of you for being here today and your work. And obviously, you have a very tough job ahead, so thank you for your commitment to doing this. So just Masi, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Senator.
Thank you, Senator. So, Senator Teletaigui, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Sujus Masi. And thank you so much again for being just excellent leaders in our community and stepping up again to assist Guam in this very trying and difficult time. Your background is amazing, and there's no better couple that could probably fit in, I know. Working together is going to make a difference to get us out of this, at least to keep us afloat. Thank you so much for doing this. And Josie, it's very nice meeting you. It's not easy, your job. I was a former deputy general manager at GVB, and the kind of work you're doing is constant every day. So I wish you the very best, especially in these trying times, trying to, take $1 and stretch it to $10, or finding out who's going to get paid and who's not. So Josie, I'm just going to go into your section. And then, by the way, Governor and Jerry, I want to thank you for meeting with me a couple weeks ago and talking with me directly on the plans and moving forward. We had great conversation, and I'll probably touch on some of that. So Josie, with the funding for 2020, I really appreciate the PowerPoint presentation, because it was I don't have a number. Oh yes, here it is, on page 6, I believe. Projected revenues for the remaining of this quarter is more of a reality check, because in the CRER that we receive at the legislature for the month of July is projected at $2 million. Excuse me. $2 million. For August, the projected revenues is at 2.1, and then September at 3.0. But the reality is, yours is more true to form. Because we're looking at something in June of this year, the actual that came in was only $525,000.
Correct.
When in last year, of course, in June, it was $3.2 million. It's considerably low. So to see something in CRER and to look at the Tourist Attraction Fund, only a $10 million less shortfall is truly not a reality here. Yours is more of a reality, and that's going to be quite substantial shortfall there, almost an additional 10 million to 15 maybe, all depending. So that being said, that's 2020. Knowing that we passed legislation to allow you to use the rainy day fund, that was $650,000, but that's $650,000 that was appropriated from the TAF. So in perspective, what are we looking at as far as any kind of shortfall for 2020?
For 2020, we are almost covered because we drastically made adjustments on our budget. But for FY 2021, you know that there's a fiscal note that was noted by BBMR as far as the request for the rainy day fund for the recovery efforts of our marketing office. So what we're looking at is to request from the board to repurpose some of our funding, which is technically supposedly allocated for capital expenditure. Basically, originally we have $3 million in liquid cash that is dedicated for Matapang and Ipaw Beach upgrade. And we also have for San Vitor's flood mitigation project that has been dedicated for years. For those projects, it just needs execution. And those are the sources of funding that we will probably have to request from our board to realign and repurpose those funds to cover the marketing efforts that we have. Because based on this $9.2 million that we are requesting right now, there's only $1.8 million that will be allocated for marketing, our marketing department, which is nearly impossible for them to execute their plan, and including the recovery. And knowing that we are still for the destination and development, it's not only the island, there's tree mitigation, the culvert cleaning, the Fujita Ponding Basin. There's a huge project that we recently accomplished on that, or 90% completed, and there is some excess funding on that we will be able to request for repurpose.
So what about the the nonprofit organizations that was in the budget bill, almost $1 million, I think it was.
That was $640,000 for 17 nonprofit organizations.
Has that been paid?
Yes, for FY20, we've already disbursed almost 75% of that. Only 189,000 is pending for the fourth quarter. That's that's already set. We're just waiting for them to complete their compliance in order for us to release those funds. That will
Okay.
not be touched for FY20.
Okay, that was one of my concerns because, that funding right there. And if, if you're taking cuts, then I think everybody else should be taking cuts. But unfortunately, the law says it shall be paid, Moving forward, that being said, with the funding that you have for 2020 and looking like the major cuts that you're making, and now requesting a budget of $9.2 million for the budget for FY 2021. And I guess this would probably go, and then the request that you're making here today, Governor and Jerry, is that you would like the board to have full carte blanche on how to spend this $9.2 million, yes. Right? I have no doubt that it's going to be spent wisely, and I know you, Governor, you can take $1 and stretch it to $10 and make it happen, so I know no problem on that. But I hope that you really consider on using some of that money for social media. Technology is probably the way to go, and I know it reaches a broader group of people, especially now during the pandemic when everybody is online these days and reviewing it. So to not leave that out, and I'm pretty sure you haven't, and you thought about that. Jerry?
No, as a matter of fact, we have a fairly robust social media plan in all of our markets, and we get reports of that every month, sometimes even more frequently.
Yep, Techline, it'll go a long way. Also, being that, a lot of the tourist industry, those in the service industry, look to GVB quite a bit, especially their members of GVB for assistance. What is GVB doing right now to assist those service industry people who've lost their jobs, who have been furloughed? Are you assisting at all with helping them filling out applications for PUAs and what is GVB doing to assist the service
We
industry?
actually have been working with GITA for some of the smaller businesses. We have not, as a bureau, sat down personally with these people filling out forms, but we've created the arrangement where GITA actually is helping these small businesses. And there's a survey that the University of Guam had conducted with our membership, and I think they're going to be sharing that with you guys and the governor later on. But the initial look at that survey corroborates basically how dire straits they are, and has enabled GITA to make some adjustments in their policy on the terms. I think that, I'm not familiar with all the details, Senator, but I know that there's some movement in, just last night I ran into a small business owner who got his $2,000 just the other day, for example. So it is working, but I don't know to what extent people are applying, although we've created the, to your point, assistance channel for them to have some help.
Okay, that's good to hear. I know that people have called our offices as well on having assistance and doing what we can, but yeah, GITA is probably the right area to send them as well. You hit it on the nose when you first came out on let's clean up Guam, let's take this opportunity, turn what seems to be a crisis into something good. And you did by, starting the vamping up on cleaning the island and making it beautiful again. And one of the things that we spoke about, Governor, when I went to visit you is the cameras that are situated in Tumon. I introduced a bill earlier in the year for cameras, some funding for cameras. There is a blind spot up at JFK Road, which is considerably a dangerous area. I've had incidences there. And if I'm not mistaken, some of the cameras were down. the last time we spoke. So what is the status on,
Well, you
your
know-
initiative for those cameras to up and running?
Well, immediately when we spoke, I reached out to Lieutenant Steve Amaguin, the police department, and I got distracted. He called back, and then I got distracted. But I will get back on it.
Is this all related to your budget? If it's not, we need to move on. Okay,
So-
I just don't want us to go off. We did earlier with some of the senators. Senator Tello, you have any other questions on the budget?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
If I-
thank you.
If I may, thank you so much for the opportunity to have my time to speak and ask questions. So, Governor, on the camera scenario, the safety issue at Tumon, it's not only Tumon, but we also talked about Seti Bay and all the areas. This is a great opportunity, and whatever funding that you have, and you're looking at grants, which I think is commendable for you to find some way to protect the tourist and our local community.
That
That's
was a
what was.
$200,000 appropriation, right?
It was a $200,000 appropriation for that. And if you talk to Chief of Police,
Yeah.
maybe you guys can get together.
I will follow up, I promise.
I greatly appreciate it because I think the more importance of having a beautiful island and our culture is providing not only that, but the safety of our island. So our visitors coming to Guam, they come to Guam because it's safe. They come to Guam because if anything should happen, there's medical facilities that will take care of them. And that's another thing that really needs to be looked at is the health perspective on Guam, the hospital places for individuals to go. Because I don't know about you, but if I go to a destination, there are two things in mind. Is it safe? And two, if anything should happen, is there a medical facility there that'll assist me? So those are a couple of things that I hope you consider because I totally support your initiative on taking this funding and deciding how to spend it and spend it wisely. So thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, Josie. It was nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Kelly, you're the last. Do you have any questions, ma'am?
Seduis Masi, Mr. Chair. And I'll try to combine Senator Samita Perez's question into mine so that she can get her question in as well. I'll go ahead and take this off. This particular mask is especially muffly,
Yes.
and there's nobody near me. So, Seduis Masi, for all of you for being here. You've been very helpful. You've outlined your concerns. Those were so important to hear about because you've been very proactive, and that's what we need right now is a lot of proactivity. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure everybody else here does as well. And I want to start off by saying thank you for your good partnerships that I've been referring to, and maybe it's a term that's an older one and I'm just not familiar to it, but I've been starting to refer to it as a One Gov Guam approach. I remember hearing that for the governor during your term, that was really a strong suit for your administration, that agencies would pull together, they would work together, and if any issue came up, they were there for each other. And now more than ever, this is going to need to be our approach. And so GVB has been an excellent partner to the Department of Parks and Recreation, and I thank you for that on their behalf, as well as to so many other agencies. You've worked very well with GITA and others, and it's just been so important, and it will be even more important going forward. I will pass on that concept of engaging local families to assist with maintaining park areas. And this is really important down south, as you were talking about. There are fewer job opportunities down there, and that's why we see it's really hard to keep the population down south. They migrate to the central and northern areas, but the south is a very special place, and we want to be able to provide opportunities, so this may be something that works well. We have something like that that's happening at Fort Soledad with the local vendor there. She has a fruit stand, she watches out for the bathrooms, she's our eyes and ears. It's the perfect kind of local public-private partnership in a sense as a vendor there. So I also agree with the oversight chair, and you've enacted it in various ways, that it takes everything from clean roads to safe streets to make us an integral destination. And so GVB's been very good at having that foresight, and we will continue to get those things done all together, I'm assured. As I've already mentioned, I won't get into the details of all of your strategic planning that you're putting into place to try to get this recovery happening. So one of them could be, you mentioned this resetting the focus, which having oversight over cultural affairs, I am all for resetting to have more of that cultural emphasis. We have many important things that are part of our destination, and I'm excited. I've heard that Mr. Jerry has a background in environment, and we got plenty of environment to be promoting as well. Other destinations like Singapore has done this. They walk people through step by step the tropical forest that people who live in cities don't understand and don't have access to. It's got a lot of potential for us to continue to move forward on. And one of the things that I'm hoping, I had sent a letter to Pilar before she left, and maybe I'll resend it as well. I think there are good partnerships in working with Gita in part of this reset, right? We're living in a virtual world right now. It's just part of our reality. And we have such avid followers, people from Guam, Chamorros from Guam and elsewhere, who really want to connect with the homeland, the motherland, their place of like strongest identity. But also we've seen in Japan that they have these teasers, if you will, sort of approach to keep people interested in coming back when they can actually physically occur. So there are opportunities, I think, that we could do. Virtual weddings on the beach with cultural dancers coming together with a package deal for a discount for when they can come in person, to keep them, interested in thinking of us as that destination spot for weddings and honeymoons and anniversaries. There are virtual hikes and trails for all of the stationary bikers out there and the treadmill users, people who go jogging and so forth. And so I think you guys could be real leaders with revitalizing or setting some kind of new industries in diversifying tourism products as you go forward. And so I know that you guys are real creative thinkers, and maybe that's something that looks like it has potential. It doesn't save everything for sure, but it might be something small to keep people engaged and get some jobs or businesses continuing out there. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was with the rainy day fund. So the government of Guam has a rainy day fund, but I think you were referring to GVB also has been thoughtful enough to have their own rainy day fund. Were you speaking to GVB's rainy day fund earlier?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And again, kudos to GVB for having thought ahead in that manner. Is that something that you will be continuing to put money aside for, or are the next 4 years, it's not looking likely and it's just kind of all hands on deck and all money's on deck?
Originally, on our first budget request, it has an allocated of $650,000, but unfortunately, because of our current drastic adjustment with our visitors' arrival projection, we don't foresee of any $650,000 that will be reallocated for rainy day fund.
Right, and it's understandable given the time that we're in. This is the time that rainy day funds are especially built for. So it makes perfect sense that you're using it.
It's raining.
Yeah, literally, it's rainy season, and figuratively, definitely. So it's understandable. I just wanted to understand that in going forward. And the question that Senator Sabina had, it goes along sort of with the One Gov Guam approach, is whether there's thought of any consolidation maybe any formal overlap between you and other entities, or if you're planning at keeping your approach more towards these partnerships and mutual understandings to help each other out.
Yeah. We've been internalizing what we had to do, and to the extent possible, as appropriate, we communicate with sister agencies, whether it's GITA or DOA or GURA or anybody else, but we have not really, as a bureau, at least while we're there, since I just got there, we've not looked at consolidation with other government departments. And one of the issues that would need to be addressed if that happens is that GVB is really a different kind of animal, okay? It's a private, nonprofit membership corporation. So we do have private members with equity in the pot, and so we're not really free without authorization to talk consolidation with non-GVB entities.
And I think some of the approach that we've been talking about as a legislature as well is that exactly what you're doing, to have the personnel there, but to utilize them to make sure that we're continuing to serve the community, but also to be looking for those grant opportunities and things for the operational costs so that, again, we can get to serving our community to the best of our ability. And so it's good to know that in the big picture you have those different ways of looking at it and have them under consideration. And I just wanted to mention before I close that we had talked a little bit about the staycation idea, and I remember from earlier reading that now Japan is its own entity, but that had saved them a lot. Domestic tourism had really been very important to them in helping them have their economic recovery. And one of the things I just wanted to pass on, that when I had the ability to meet with planners at the Pentagon, and when I've had some opportunity to have discussions with the Rear Admiral, I have advocated for that when they come out here in their tour of duty, we have something like 11,000 or more military personnel that are here. And when they're out here for 2 years or 4 years or more, that they have just a staycation sort of a package with a lot of local experience and a lot of local interaction. So if we can continue to push that and have those thousands of people coming in, but make sure that they are, one way or the other, kind of more formally participating in these sort of things, it's a way for them to be assisting our economy, living up to that one Guam ideal, and getting money more directly in the pockets of our businesses and our communities. And it really, I think, fosters a lot of just understanding between both communities. They have a deeper appreciation for Guam, and we have a more connected understanding to what they're doing when they're here. So I will continue advocating for that because I think it's something that has potential and something that we can ask of them.
Yeah, we don't disagree. I don't disagree.
Sejus Maasi, Mr. Chair, for letting me ask my questions. And I just want to mention that thank you for entertaining some of those DPR questions. We just had an informational briefing the other day. They would have been perfect questions to have been brought up there because DPR does need to answer to them. And we need them to have a plan of action. So we will be continuing to have informational briefings and oversight hearings for them and make sure that they're on top of shaping up our island. But again, thank you for being very good partners to DPR.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kelly Marsh. Senator, Oversight Chair, do you have a few more questions
Just
you
a
want to
couple
ask them?
points, yes, please. So the TAF revenue is wholly dependent, or our projection of TAF revenues for FY21 is wholly dependent on our projection of visitor arrivals. So could you just please submit to us after this hearing, like an analysis or whatever your team can put together regarding this visitor arrival number, because it's changing so much lately.
Yeah.
And so what you want us to focus on, I just want an analysis that we can rely on also, so we're being responsible.
Yeah, we'd be happy to share with you the basic assumptions that
Okay.
went into those
Great.
numbers. But it's not just about arrivals, it's also about average room rates in
Room
the
rates,
hotels.
yes, the formula,
And
right.
so we've gone through that drill, and we'd be happy to send you a copy of the basic assumptions.
Okay, and so then we will rely on that during our budget hearings. Appreciate that. The other one is, I wanted to ask you why we are not included in the Japan bubble that we heard about this morning on the news, but perhaps if you could just send a letter to us and explain that. I want to know, for example, what did we do wrong? Is there something the government is doing wrong that we can fix? Is it something we were just not at the right place at the right time, or is it something more, significant?
Well, first of all, I'm not even sure that, that thing is not really initiated yet.
Okay.
There's still testing required so with us, the survey we took was that a big amount of people in Japan is just not going to be traveling if they have to be tested. So we don't know how good that is in that bubble, but to be sure, we would like to ride on the coattails of Hawaii, that we're in the process right now, since yesterday, trying to be able to go over there with Dr. Mike Cruz to see Governor Iggy and the Senate and the House, to be able to, appeal to them to include Guam in that bubble. And Japan, I think, would really look very favorably at that. So we're trying to do that. We've been trying to get together with Hawaii, but Hawaii was up and down, and then they kind of got dissed by our own reporting. So they, we'll figure that out. But we are trying to ride on the coattails of Hawaii by partnering with them.
So in other words, if we could get included in the Hawaii bubble, you think that would influence whether we are included or not in the Japan safe travel bubble, right?
Yes.
Okay.
If I could
yes,
just add to
please.
that, actually, in June, we met with Mr. Hasagawa, the Consul General, and all down the line, and the Korean Consul as well. We've been talking bubble since June.
Yes.
But the two biggest impediments is their country's restrictions and their consumers worried about getting 14-day quarantine on arrival and on departure. Since that time, the medical community has come up with a formula of risk stratification and allowing those travelers, as long as they stay less than 5 days, to come in and out without testing. We've done kind of our part in terms of making it as easy to facilitate entry and exit of travelers. Now, what we need to do is really work directly with the different foreign ministries in Japan, for example, in Korea, to persuade them that we're managing our risk and that we can establish this COVID corridor similar to other destinations in Europe and in Australia and even parts of Asia.
So do you have plans to do that?
We're continuing the dialogue.
Discuss with the ministries for me?
Yes, we're continuing the dialogue, and actually we've got some communications prepared for the governor to sign, to send off, to reinforce the earlier dialogue that we've had.
All right. I am concerned because they did announce, yes, well, or tentatively announced what Japan's bubble is going to be, and it seems that we're not included. Okay. My final question is just, I've been following along with GVB, the board, their projects to mitigate the flooding in Tumon, to repair, all of the infrastructure there and clean it out, and that they're So what they've relayed to me is that this is very much going to cure the flooding situation. They've taken care of the ponding basin and then all the culverts that were blocked. But there was, originally there were hot bond proceeds dedicated to this two-month flooding. That was $5 million. And in November 2017, the GITA board voted to divert that $5 million to the Palacio instead. And I wanted to just ask you if the Palacio down here in the, and my understanding is that is still where it's allocated. And I wanted to know from you if you believe that that is still appropriate based on your progress with this two-month flooding.
Let me answer that with a little bit of history, because I think it's important to understand that the origins of the hot bond dates back a number of years, and there are three principal reasons for doing that. The first reason is to fix the darn problem of flooding in Tumon
Right. It was
once
the
and
number
for
one
all.
project on
That's
that list.
number one
Yes.
of the objective. The second objective is to recapitalize the cultural heritage and attractions that Guam has to reinforce the brand identity that we are articulating to our markets. And number three has to do with public safety up around the strategic areas of our visitors. That never happened the way it was. What had happened by the time the bonds were approved was that there's a lot of funding that got diverted to various and sundry reasons. So going back to your question now,
$5 million.
whether it's still appropriate to reinvest in this area, the answer is absolutely.
All right, so given everything, even our current conditions, you wouldn't request that that $5 million be put back to two-month flood mitigation?
The two-month flood mitigation has its own allocation, but Josie, correct me if I'm
Yes,
wrong.
in fact, we just finished a major contract for Fujita Ponding Basin, which several dump trucks has been taken out to.
Right, but the funding source for that is your budget.
Yes.
Yes, it's
ma'am.
different, right, that's why I'm asking.
And the other one is the culvert cleaning.
Right.
And basically, on our current budget proposed for the 9.2 million, we also allocated maintenance costs of about $300,000 to ensure that on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, that's continuously being maintained to make sure that Tumon is
Okay.
safe.
I'm just clarifying because when they diverted the 5 million, the reason they gave was that it was not even close to the amount necessary to take care of flood mitigation in Tumon. But now we are hearing almost the opposite, that you are actually able to take care of flood mitigation with your operating budget. So that's great. I'm glad to hear it. But I just wanted to confirm now, after these years that you've gone through of these different projects for the flood mitigation.
Yes, I'm not familiar with the background of that, Senator, but I will check and we will get back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Josie, can we get that? It sounds like you already have a budget laid out for the 9 million. If we could get it, then.
Yes,
Appreciate
in fact, Senator, we just finished a $260,000 Phase 1 project and $195,000 Phase 2, which is the culvert cleaning. And as you would see also on our citizen-centric report that was just released yesterday, at the back of that page, you can see the condition before and after
Yes.
of those culvert cleanings.
No,
in
I've
Guam.
watched the progress of it, so it's very remarkable. So I'm hoping it sticks and it works. But no, my question now is, if you've already outlined your proposal for the 9 million, if we could get a copy of that.
Yes.
If I could clarify that, Senator, at the beginning of this hearing, I did indicate that whatever the top line is that was approved, we'd like the board to have a look at it. The board has not had a chance, these are our working sheets right now, just to see how we can live within that amount. So we would need really to, with all due respect, we need to discuss that with the board and get their approval.
All right. Thank you, Senator Therese. Well, I'm going to advise the GVB folks, Uncle Governor and Uncle Jerry. Josie, you're asking for 13, give us a budget to digest. We need that for our budget session. What you're gonna do with the board, you guys do what you need to do. But basically, that's what you're asking for. You're not asking for 22, you're not asking for 40. We'll work with the 13. And that's what we're gonna be looking at in the Budget Act. All right? Thank you.
May I
Sir.
just one thing, because I think the senator's still here, but I've been working with several people, one from the Senate in the U.S., one from the House, two from the House, and found out that, you know, if we don't have enough problems here in Guam with tourism, this Congressman Tiffany of Wisconsin tried to defund, you know, the entire amount of the visa waiver countries, and that would have killed our tourism completely. And so I just want to thank, after alerting Congressman San Nicolas, he pulled that and stopped it today, just to let you know. And I think that with the restrictions we have in law right now, that you are prohibited from having a lobbyist, whether you pay him $10 or $20, I think you should take a look at that, because we really need someone to keep an eye on a lot of these things in Washington. And so if you could, at least for GVB, remove the restrictions of lobbyists.
We'll talk about that as we go along, Governor. Okay? Thank you, colleagues, for your questions. The committee will conclude the budget hearing with the Guam Visitors Bureau. Please, committee will continue to receive testimonies. Please provide your testimonies to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, Housing, and submit it via email, senatorjoesnogson@gmail.com. Sizus Masi for your attendance and participation in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The budget hearing on Bill 282-35 LS relative to the Guam Visitors Bureau is now adjourned at 11:40. Thank you. Have a nice day, Carl.